The bullying didn't stop after the cafeteria incident. In fact, it got worse. Jake had found a new target, and he enjoyed every moment of it. Leah was different, quiet, calm, and hard to rattle. That made her more interesting to Jake. He wasn't used to people ignoring him. Usually, his jokes made people cry or get angry. But Leah never did either. She just stayed quiet and walked away, and that made Jake even more eager to break her. Every day, Jake found a new way to embarrass her. In the hallway, he would call her names that were both cruel and personal. Sometimes he would bump into her on purpose, making her books fall to the ground, then pretend it was an accident. "Oops, sorry, didn't see you," he'd say with a fake smile while his friends laughed. Other students watched but looked away. They didn't want to get involved. Leah kept her head down. She picked up her books in silence, never showing the pain on her face. But inside, she was hurting. No one wanted to be treated like that, and no one deserved it. Still, she refused to tell the teachers. She didn't want to be known as the girl who ran to adults every time something went wrong. She had made a promise to herself that she would try to handle things on her own. Sometimes, when Jake wasn't around, Leah would go to the school library and sit in the far corner by the window. That was her safe place. The sunlight would fall across the pages of her book, and for a little while, she could forget everything else. She would read stories of heroes and strong girls, and it made her feel stronger too. But as soon as the bell rang, her peaceful world disappeared, and the real one came crashing back. Jake was getting bolder. One morning he scribbled something nasty on Leah's locker with a black marker. It was a word too ugly to repeat, something that stung deep inside. Leah stood in front of it, frozen. A few students saw it and quickly turned away, pretending they hadn't. But one girl, a quiet freshman named Emily, looked at Leah and whispered, "That's not fair." Leah looked at her, surprised. Emily's face turned red and she hurried away, but that small comment stayed with Leah all day. Maybe, just maybe, someone cared. Jake, on the other hand, kept pushing. In the classroom, he threw little paper balls at Leah's back. During gym, he laughed loudly when she missed a ball in dodgeball. "Maybe you should sit out, princess," he said. "Don't want you getting a scratch." Leah said nothing. She picked up the ball and continued playing. She wasn't the fastest or the strongest, but she didn't give up. That, too, made Jake angry. He didn't understand why she didn't fight back. That's what bullies like him wanted. A reaction, a sign that they were in control. But Leah never gave him that. She stayed calm, even when she was breaking inside. At lunch, she sat alone again. Her food was untouched. She stared out the window, thinking about her father. Vin always told her, "You are stronger than you think. You have power in your silence, and when the time is right, you'll speak. And when you do, they'll listen." She repeated those words in her head like a song. They gave her courage. That day, Jake took things even further. He walked by her table, looked at her sandwich, and said loudly, "What is that? A trash meal for a trash girl?" He grabbed it and tossed it onto the floor. The sandwich landed with a soft, sad thud. The room went quiet for a second. Leah stood up, her face calm, but her eyes were filled with something different now, something stronger. She looked Jake straight in the eyes. "Why are you doing this?" she asked softly. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried across the room. Jake laughed. "Because you act like you're better than us." "What? Too good to talk? Too good to sit with anyone?" "I don't think I'm better," she said. "I'm just trying to be myself." Jake didn't expect her to talk back. He paused for a second, then shrugged. "Whatever," he said, and walked away. But there was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. That night, Leah went home with her, heart heavy. She didn't tell her dad everything, but he could see something was wrong. "Rough day?" he asked gently as he poured her some orange juice. She nodded. "Yeah." He sat beside her and looked into her eyes. "You don't have to tell me everything," he said. "But remember, silence doesn't mean weakness, and sometimes speaking up can be the strongest thing you do." Leah thought about his words. She still wasn't ready to tell the world who her father was. Not because she was ashamed, but because she wanted to fight this battle as herself. Not as someone hiding behind a famous name. She wanted to show the world that even without her father's name, she mattered. The next day, Leah walked into school a little taller. She greeted the receptionist with a smile. She looked people in the eye. Jake was still there, waiting in the hallway. But something about Leah's energy was different. It made him pause for a moment. In class, Jake tried to get laughs by saying something mean about Leah's voice. "Maybe she's a robot," he joked. "Ever notice how she talks like a machine?" No one laughed this time. Even his closest friends looked away. One of them mumbled, "Come on, man, just let it go." Jake frowned. Things were changing, and he didn't like it. That afternoon, Leah found a small note in her locker. It said, "I see what you're going through. You're strong. Don't let him win." It wasn't signed, but Leah smiled. Someone cared. Someone saw. Jake was watching from a distance. He noticed the smile and the note. He felt a flicker of jealousy. How could this girl, who didn't fight back, somehow still win people over? In his own twisted way, Jake wanted power. But Leah had something better. Respect. And she didn't even ask for it. She earned it with her calm, her strength, and her quiet courage. The next day in science class, Jake pulled his worst stunt yet. While the teacher stepped out for a minute, he walked to Leah's desk, grabbed her notebook, and threw it into the trash. "Oops," he said again. Leah stood up, looked around the class, and said, "Does anyone think this is okay?" The room was silent. "No," a girl said quietly. Then another boy nodded. "No, it's not," he added. Jake stared around in disbelief. His usual army of laughter was gone. People were no longer amused. The teacher walked back in and saw Leah holding her notebook, now covered in bits of food. "What happened here?" she asked. Before Leah could speak, a boy in the front row said, "Jake threw her book in the trash." The teacher looked at Jake. "Is that true?" Jake didn't answer. "I'll deal with this," the teacher said firmly. She took Leah aside later and asked if she wanted to report everything. Leah nodded slowly. It was time. After school, Leah sat on the front steps, waiting for her ride. The sleek black SUV pulled up, and she got in. Vin looked at her through the mirror. "Long day?" he asked. She nodded, then smiled a little. "But better than yesterday." He smiled too. "That's how we win. One day at a time." Leah leaned, her head back, and watched the school disappear behind them. The battle wasn't over, but for the first time she didn't feel alone. People were starting to see. The truth was beginning to shine through the cracks, and soon, even Jake would learn who Leah really was, and just how strong she had always been. Leah was a quiet girl with deep brown eyes and soft curls that bounced gently when she walked. She had just moved to a new town with her adoptive family and was about to start at Clearwater High School. It wasn't easy being the new kid. Everything was strange. The buildings, the students, even the smell of the cafeteria food. But Leah didn't complain. She had been through much worse in life. This was just another challenge she had to face. The morning was cool when Leah walked into school. For the first time, she wore a simple hoodie, jeans, and sneakers. Nothing flashy. Her backpack was clean and heavy with new books. As she stepped out of the sleek black SUV that had dropped her off, a few students turned their heads. The car was big and shiny, and not the kind you usually saw in the school parking lot. Some kids whispered and stared, wondering who she was. But Leah just walked straight ahead, her head high, pretending not to notice. In her first class, the teacher introduced her. "This is Leah. She just moved here. Please make her feel welcome." Leah gave a small smile and sat quietly in the back of the room. No one said much to her, but she didn't seem to mind. She focused on her work, took notes, and kept to herself. During breaks, she sat alone on a bench and watched others laugh and talk in groups. It wasn't that she didn't want friends, she just wasn't sure who to trust yet. There was one boy who seemed to notice Leah more than the others. His name was Jake. He was tall, loud, and always surrounded by other boys who laughed at everything he said. Jake was known as the school bully. He liked to pick on kids who were different, anyone who was quiet, shy, or new. He saw Leah sitting, alone, and smirked. "Hey, new girl," he said loudly one day in the hallway. "You lose your voice or just too good to talk to us?" His friends chuckled behind him. Leah looked at him calmly and said nothing. She turned and walked away. That only made Jake more interested. In the next few days, Jake began to tease her more. He made comments about her skin color, her quiet nature, and even the way she walked. "You trying to be mysterious, or are you just weird?" he'd say. Leah never responded. She didn't want to give him the reaction he wanted. Inside, it hurt. But she had learned to stay calm. She had seen worse behavior from people before, and she knew bullies were usually weak inside. Some students noticed what Jake was doing, but no one said anything. They didn't want to become Jake's next target. So they stayed silent. Leah felt alone but reminded herself why she was here. She wanted a normal school life. She didn't want people to treat her differently just because of who her family was. At home, things were very different. Leah lived in a big house with a warm, loving family. Her adoptive father was someone famous, someone the whole world knew, but Leah had asked him not to mention it to the school. She wanted people to know her as Leah, not as someone connected to fame. She wanted real friends, not people who only cared about who her dad was. One afternoon in the cafeteria, things got worse. Leah was walking with her lunch tray, looking for a quiet corner to sit, when Jake stuck out his leg and tripped her. The tray flew into the air, and her food spilled everywhere. Leah fell hard onto the floor. The whole cafeteria burst into laughter. Jake stood over her, grinning. "Oops," he said loudly. "Didn't see you there." Leah looked up at him, her face calm but her hands slightly shaking. She slowly stood up, wiped her hands on her jeans, and picked up her tray. The room was still filled with laughter, but it began to die down as people noticed how gracefully Leah handled the moment. She didn't yell, cry, or complain. She just walked away quietly, holding her head high. One of the teachers saw everything from across the room. She didn't say anything at the moment, but her eyes followed Leah with concern. Something about the girl's calm strength touched her heart. Later that day, Leah sat in the library alone, flipping through a book. Her eyes weren't really reading. Her mind was spinning with thoughts. Why did Jake hate her so much? What had she ever done to him? She had tried so hard to stay quiet to avoid attention, but it didn't seem to work. In the hallway, Jake and his friends laughed again. "I think the new girl's scared of us," he said. "She acts like she's special, like she's better than everyone." His friends nodded, but deep down, even they could tell Leah was different. Not in a weak way, but in a strong, quiet way they didn't understand. Leah didn't tell anyone about what was happening. Not the teachers, not even her family. She didn't want to be seen as someone who couldn't handle her problems. She had learned to be strong from a young age. But even strong people get tired, and Leah was starting to feel the weight of being alone. At lunch the next day, she sat at the same bench outside, eating her sandwich. A few younger students walked by and smiled at her. One girl even sat next to her for a few minutes, asking her name. Leah smiled and answered softly. That small moment gave her a bit of hope. Not everyone at school was mean, but Jake wasn't done. In the coming days, he made fun of Leah in front of more people. He called her names that no one should ever have to hear. He mocked her skin, her silence, and even her clothes. Still, Leah didn't react. That made Jake even angrier. "She thinks she's too good for us," he muttered one day. "I'll find out who she really is. She's hiding something." And she was. But not for the reasons Jake thought. Leah wasn't hiding because she was ashamed. She was hiding because she wanted to be seen for who she really was, not for who her family was. She wanted to be accepted on her own terms. She wanted to be known for her heart, not for the Hollywood actor who tucked her in at night and called her "my little lion," with love in his eyes. Jake had no idea who he was messing with. He didn't know that the girl he mocked and tripped had been through more pain than he could imagine. He didn't know that behind her soft eyes was a strength that came from surviving life's hardest challenges. And most of all, he didn't know that the man who had raised her had once faced his own bullies and taught Leah how to rise above them. For now, Leah kept her secret close. She waited, watching, learning. She didn't need to shout or fight back. She believed that one day the truth would come out. And when it did, people would see her differently. Not because of who her father was, but because of the courage she showed even when no one was looking. And so, the quiet girl at Clearwater High walked through the halls each day with a calm, steady strength. She was more than she seemed, and soon everyone would know it. Leah's days at Clearwater High had been hard since the first week she arrived. She was bullied almost every day by Jake, the school's toughest and loudest student. But no matter how cruel he was, Leah stayed calm. She didn't fight back. She didn't tell anyone who she really was. She kept her secret to herself, even though it could have stopped everything in a second. She believed in staying strong without using her father's name like a shield. What no one at school knew, not the teachers, not the students, not even the ones who quietly admired her, was that Leah was not just a normal girl. She was the adopted daughter of someone very famous, someone who was known around the world for his roles in action movies, for his deep voice, and his powerful presence, Vin Diesel. Leah never liked to talk about her family at school. She didn't want people to treat her differently because of her connection to someone famous. She wanted people to know her for who she was, not because of her father's fame. Most of the students thought she was just a quiet, average girl who had come from another city. No one imagined she came from a home filled with love, strength, and the kind of lessons most people only see in movies. At home, things were peaceful. Their house was large but not too flashy. It had a warm feeling, the kind that made you feel safe the moment you stepped inside. Leah's room had posters of books she loved, some framed photos of her with her adoptive family, and shelves full of novels. Her favorite place was the balcony, where she would sit in the evenings with her journal and write about her day, her dreams, and her feelings. She didn't always write about the bullying. Some days she didn't want to remember it. But her words helped her stay strong. Vin Diesel had adopted Leah when she was just a little girl. It happened after he got involved in a charity program that helped children from broken homes. He had gone there thinking he would just give a donation and maybe spend time with a few kids. But then he met Leah. She was sitting in a corner, drawing pictures in silence, while the other kids played around. Something about her touched his heart immediately. She was only 6 at the time, but had the eyes of someone much older, eyes that had seen pain but still held hope. Vin sat next to her and asked what she was drawing. She looked up, unsure, but then smiled and showed him a picture of a house, a tree, and 2 stick figures, one big and one small, holding hands. "That's me," she said, pointing at the small figure. "And that's my future dad." Vin didn't know why, but he felt something powerful at that moment. He returned to visit her again, and after a long process, he adopted her. From that day forward, he promised to give her the love and safety she had never known before. He taught her many things. He taught her how to be strong but kind, how to speak up but stay graceful, and how to believe in herself even when the world seemed unfair. He never forced his fame on her. In fact, he encouraged her to live a normal life. "You don't have to tell anyone who I am," he said once. "You are special with or without my name." And Leah believed that. That's why she never told anyone at school, not even when the bullying got worse. She wanted to prove to herself that she could stand on her own 2 feet. At school, Leah continued to stay quiet, but people were starting to notice her strength. Even though she was bullied, she never broke down in public. She never shouted, never cried in the hallway. She just kept walking, kept studying, and kept being kind. Some students, especially the younger ones, started to respect her quietly. A few of them even started sitting near her at lunch, hoping her quiet bravery would rub off on them. One afternoon, after a long day of school, Leah came home to find Vin waiting with her favorite snack, apple slices with peanut butter. He knew she liked that after a stressful day. She sat down at the kitchen table and he looked at her. "Rough week?" he asked gently. Leah nodded. "Jake's not stopping." Vin leaned back in his chair and sighed. "I know it's hard not to tell the world who you are, but you've made me proud. You've shown more strength than most people ever do. You've been fighting your battle your way." Leah looked down at her hands. "Sometimes I wonder if it's even worth it." Vin reached across the table and touched her hand. "Leah, listen to me. Strength isn't about shouting. It's about standing tall when the world wants you to fall. It's about walking through fire and not letting it change your heart. You've already won in my eyes." Leah gave him a small smile. It helped to hear that. It helped to know that someone understood. That night she went to her room and opened her journal. She wrote about how she wanted to tell people the truth, but not because she wanted attention. She wanted the bullying to stop, not just for her, but for anyone else who had ever been made to feel small. She knew Jake was hurting inside too. She could see it in his eyes sometimes. Maybe he bullied others because it gave him a sense of control. But hurting others never healed anything. Leah had learned that the hard way. A few days later, something happened that made Leah think more deeply about her choices. During an art class, students were asked to paint something that showed who they really were inside. Most students drew themselves doing hobbies or with their families. Leah painted a picture of a lion standing in the rain. It wasn't a sad lion. It looked calm and strong even though the storm around it was loud and wild. When the teacher asked her what it meant, Leah said quietly, "It's about staying strong even when things are hard." The teacher smiled. "That's beautiful. It's powerful." Jake saw the painting and rolled his eyes. "What? You think you're a lion now?" Leah looked at him, not with anger, but with honesty. "Maybe. Or maybe I just don't like the storm." That answer confused Jake. He didn't know how to respond, so he just walked away. But something was changing. The other students started looking at Leah differently, not as a quiet girl, but as someone wise and full of quiet power. Later that week, the school had a parent meeting for all students. Parents were invited to visit the school, meet teachers, and see their children's work. Leah didn't say anything about it at home. She wasn't sure she wanted her dad to come. Not because she was embarrassed, she just didn't want him to be recognized. But the night before the event, Vin came to her room. "I heard there's something happening at school tomorrow." Leah nodded. "Yeah, it's a parent day." Vin smiled. "Do you want me to come?" Leah hesitated. "You can, if you want. But maybe don't walk in with sunglasses and bodyguards." He laughed softly. "No bodyguards, just me." The next day, Vin came to the school dressed in jeans, a hoodie, and a baseball cap. Most people didn't recognize him at first. He met Leah's teachers, saw her artwork, and heard about her grades. Every teacher said the same thing. "Leah is respectful, smart, and kind. She's one of the strongest students we've ever met." Vin didn't say much, but his eyes were full of pride. He didn't need to tell them who he was. He just needed them to know who Leah was. As he was leaving, Jake happened to walk past the classroom. He glanced inside and froze. His eyes widened, and his mouth dropped open. He saw Leah standing next to someone he had seen in movies, in posters, in interviews. Vin Diesel, the man who played heroes, the man who could take down 10 enemies in one scene. And he was standing there, calmly, as if he belonged. Jake's face turned pale. He stepped back, confused and shocked. He walked quickly down the hallway, unsure of what he had just seen. Leah saw him, but she didn't say anything. She didn't run after him or point him out. She simply gave her father a hug and said, "Thank you for coming." That moment was quiet, but everything changed. Jake now knew the truth. The girl he had bullied, teased and mocked wasn't just a quiet nobody. She was the daughter of one of the most powerful actors in the world. But more importantly, she had never used that fact to make herself look better. She had stayed silent, taken the hits, and kept her dignity. Jake didn't say anything that day. He just left quickly. But for the first time, he began to think about what he had done. He began to feel something he hadn't felt in a long time. Guilt. The next morning, Leah walked through the school halls as usual. Her shoulders were straight, and her steps were calm. A few students looked at her differently now. Rumors had started to spread after someone recognized Vin Diesel the day before, but Leah still said nothing. She let the truth speak for itself. She wasn't trying to become popular. She wasn't trying to scare Jake. She was just living her truth, and now the mask had come off. People were beginning to see her, not as just the quiet girl, but as someone incredibly strong, kind, and real. The secret was out, but Leah still walked with the same grace as before. And for the first time she felt lighter, not because people knew who her father was, but because she had never let that define her. She had faced every challenge as Leah, and that was enough. Leah walked through the school halls quietly, just as she always had. But now things felt different. She could feel eyes following her, not in the same mocking way as before, but with curiosity and surprise. Whispers trailed behind her like shadows. People were talking, sharing the news in hurried, shocked voices. Jake had told someone, or maybe someone else had recognized her dad during the parent-teacher event. Either way, the secret was no longer a secret. The quiet girl everyone ignored was now known as the adopted daughter of Vin Diesel. At first, Leah wasn't sure what to think. She hadn't planned on people finding out. She didn't want attention, and she definitely didn't want to be treated like she was special because of her father. But there was no going back now. Students who had never said a word to her before were now coming up to her with questions and smiles. "Is it true?" one girl asked. "Is Vin Diesel really your dad?" Leah didn't want to lie. So, she nodded, but she kept her answers short. "Yes, he's my dad. But I'm still just me." Some kids smiled and nodded politely. Others looked disappointed, as if they expected her to brag or tell exciting Hollywood stories. But Leah stayed the same, calm, polite, and quiet. The strangest reaction came from Jake. He avoided her completely. For someone who had spent so many weeks bullying her, calling her names, pushing her books, and humiliating her in front of others, his silence was loud now. He no longer stood in the hallways waiting to make fun of her. He no longer threw rude jokes in her direction. Instead, he stayed far away, pretending she didn't exist. But Leah knew he was watching. She could feel his gaze from across classrooms and lunch tables. One afternoon, Leah was sitting under a tree by herself, reading a book during break. It was one of her favorite spots, quiet, shaded, and peaceful. She didn't expect anyone to bother her there. But then she heard footsteps and looked up. Jake stood a few feet away, his hands in his pockets and his head lowered. He didn't speak right away. Leah stared at him silently. She wasn't scared, but she wasn't going to make it easy for him either. He had hurt her, humiliated her, and now suddenly wanted to talk? Jake finally cleared his throat. "Hey," he said awkwardly. Leah didn't answer. He shifted his weight from one foot to the other. I didn't know who you were, he said. Leah raised an eyebrow. Would it have made a difference? Jake looked confused. What do you mean? If you knew who my dad was, would you have treated me better? She asked. Jake opened his mouth, then closed it again. I don't know, he admitted. Leah looked down at her book again. That's the problem, Jake sighed. Look, I just wanted to say, I was a jerk, a really big jerk. I don't know why I kept picking on you. I guess I thought it made me look tough. But now I just feel stupid. Leah didn't reply right away. She let his words hang in the air. Part of her wanted to get angry, to shout at him for all the pain he had caused her. But another part, the part her father had nurtured for years, told her to listen with her heart. Why did you really do it? She asked quietly. I mean, I didn't do anything to you. Jake sat down on the grass, a few feet away from her. He looked uncomfortable, like he was doing something he had never done before. I don't know, he said slowly. Maybe because you were quiet, because you didn't fight back, and because you reminded me of myself. Leah blinked. What do you mean? Jake stared ahead at the trees. My dad left when I was 10. I live with my mom and my little brother. We don't have much. I get angry a lot. At school, I feel invisible unless I make noise, unless I act like I don't care. So when I saw you, calm, quiet, like you didn't need anyone's approval, I guess it made me feel small. And I hated that. Leah was quiet. She didn't expect such honesty from him. I'm not saying it to make excuses, Jake added quickly. I'm just trying to explain. I didn't know how else to deal with it. Leah finally looked at him. You know you hurt me, right? Jake nodded. Yeah. And I'm sorry. I really am. There was a long silence between them. The wind rustled the leaves, gently above them. Leah closed her book and stood up. I forgive you, she said softly. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. Jake looked up, surprised. I'm not going to forget what happened, she continued. But I'm not going to carry it, with anger either. That's not who I am. Jake stood too. Thank you, he said, almost whispering. I'll try to be better. Leah nodded and walked away. That conversation stayed in her mind all day. It didn't erase the pain, but it did give her some peace. Maybe people really could change. Maybe Jake could become a better person. She didn't trust him yet, but at least he had taken the first step. The next few days were full of small surprises. A few students who had laughed with Jake before now came to Leah to say sorry. One girl even brought her a handmade bracelet, as a sign of friendship. You're really brave, the girl said. I don't think I could have stayed quiet like you did. Leah smiled. Sometimes silence is louder than shouting. Her teachers also started treating her with a new kind of respect, not because of who her dad was, but because they saw how she handled everything. One day, during English class, the teacher asked her to read one of her journal entries to the class. Leah hesitated at first, but then she agreed. Her voice was calm and steady as she read. I've learned that people are not always kind, but I've also learned that kindness can live inside pain. I've learned that being strong doesn't always mean fighting back with fists or words. Sometimes it means standing up every day when your heart wants to hide. I've learned that no matter how others treat me, I am enough. When she finished reading, the classroom was silent. Then someone clapped, then another, and soon the whole class was clapping, not out of pity, but out of admiration. Leah sat down, her cheeks red but her heart full. After that, things began to change. Leah wasn't alone anymore. She made a few close friends. Emily, the quiet freshman who once whispered, "That's not fair," became one of them. A boy named Sam, who sat in the back of her science class and always smiled kindly, started eating lunch with her. They didn't talk about fame or her dad. They talked about books, music, and dreams. Jake kept his distance, but he changed too. He didn't bully anyone anymore. He joined the school's art club and surprised everyone by being good at painting. One day he painted a picture of a tree standing alone in the middle of a storm. The teacher hung it on the wall, and under it, Jake had written, "Even when you stand alone, you're still standing." Leah saw it and smiled. Maybe that was his way of saying thank you. At home, Leah shared everything with Vin. He listened, without interrupting, proud of every step she took. "You didn't need my name to make a difference," he said one evening as they sat on the balcony. "You made a difference by being you." Leah leaned against his shoulder. "It was hard." "I know," he said, "but you turned pain into strength. And that's something not even a movie star can teach." She smiled, looking up at the stars. "I think I'm ready to tell my story." "Then let the world hear it," Vin said. "Not as my daughter, but as Leah, the girl who stood tall even when others tried to pull her down." And she did. A few weeks later, Leah wrote a short piece for the school newsletter. She didn't mention her father's name. Instead, she wrote about standing up to bullying, about staying strong when it's easier to give in, and about forgiving people who don't deserve it, but not forgetting what they did. She ended it with a message. You don't need a famous name to be powerful. You need courage and the decision to be kind even when the world isn't. The article spread quickly. It was shared on the school's website, then on local social media pages. People across the city started reading it. Leah became known not just for being Vin Diesel's daughter, but for being a girl with a voice that mattered. One day, as she walked through the school hallway, a little seventh grader came up to her. "Are you Leah?" she asked shyly. Leah smiled. "Yeah." The girl held out a drawing. It showed a lion standing in the rain. "You're like this lion," she said. "You helped me be brave." Leah took the drawing, her eyes filling with tears. She bent down and hugged the girl. "Thank you. That means everything." And in that moment, Leah knew her journey wasn't just about surviving. It was about helping others find their strength too. She wasn't just the girl who had been bullied. She was the girl who rose above it and helped others rise with her. The final year of school started slowly, like the soft wind that moves before a big storm. Leah walked through the gates with her head high. Things had changed a lot since the day Jake had bullied her in front of everyone. That moment had felt like the end, but it had only been the beginning. Now she was known in the school not for being silent, not for being different, and not even for being Vin Diesel's adopted daughter. She was known for being strong, kind, and real. But even when things look peaceful on the outside, life always has a way of testing people. Leah knew that, and deep inside, she was waiting. Not because she wanted problems, but because she understood that when you grow, the world often tries to test that growth. That test came sooner than she expected. One morning, the principal called Leah into his office. She was nervous at first. She had never been in trouble before. But when she walked in, she saw a woman with a camera and a notebook sitting in one of the chairs. The principal smiled and introduced them. "Leah, this is Ms. Harper. She's a journalist from a local magazine. She read your school article and wants to interview you." Leah's heart skipped. "Me?" she asked. "Yes, you," Ms. Harper said with a warm smile. "Your story touched a lot of people. We want to write a full piece about your journey, your courage, and how you stood up to bullying." Leah thought about it for a moment. She was shy by nature, and being in the spotlight still made her nervous. But then she remembered the little seventh-grade girl who had handed her the lion drawing. She remembered all the other kids who had quietly thanked her in the hallways, too afraid to speak up for themselves. Maybe this was a way to help more of them. "I'll do it," Leah said. The interview was emotional. Ms. Harper asked about everything: her early days at the school, the bullying, how it felt to be different, and how she dealt with the pain. Leah spoke honestly, even when it was hard. She didn't try to make herself sound like a hero, she just told the truth. At the end, Ms. Harper asked, "What message do you want to give to kids who are going through the same thing you did?" Leah thought for a long moment before replying, "I want them to know that it's okay to be quiet. It's okay to be different. You don't have to fight with fists or loud words to be strong. Sometimes the strongest people are the ones who keep going even when nobody notices. And no matter how bad it feels now, it does get better. You just have to believe in yourself, even if no one else does." The article came out 2 weeks later. It had a photo of Leah sitting under her favorite tree, holding the lion drawing in her lap. The title said, "The Girl Who Roared in Silence." It spread like wildfire. Local newspapers picked it up, then online news platforms. Suddenly, Leah was getting messages from people all over the country. Kids wrote to say thank you. Parents wrote to say how much her story helped them understand their children better. Even teachers from other schools reached out to ask if Leah would speak at their school assemblies. Leah was shocked at first. All her life, she had felt invisible. Now, the world was looking at her with respect. But with attention also came pressure. People expected her to have all the answers. Some started saying she only became famous because of her father. That hurt, even though Leah tried not to let it show. At school, her friends supported her. Emily, Sam, and a few others stayed close, reminding her that she didn't need to prove anything to anyone. But Jake surprised her the most. One afternoon, as she walked toward the library, she saw Jake painting a new mural on one of the school walls. It was beautiful. A large lion standing on a hill looking at the sunrise. As she watched quietly, Jake turned and smiled. "It's for you," he said. Leah was surprised. "Me?" Jake nodded. "Your story helped me more than you know. It made me realize I don't want to be the guy I used to be." Leah walked closer. "It's beautiful." Jake looked down. "I know people are saying stuff about your dad, about why people care. But just so you know, you earned all of this. No one else." Leah smiled. "Thank you." She started accepting a few speaking invitations. At first, she was nervous on stage. Her voice trembled, her hands shook. But the more she spoke, the more confident she became. She talked to students in other schools, telling her story with honesty and heart. Sometimes kids cried. Sometimes teachers did too. But every time someone came up to her afterward and said, "You made me feel seen." Leah never stopped being humble. Even when she was invited to a national TV talk show, she didn't let it get to her head. She wore a simple dress, tied her hair in a bun, and spoke the way she always did, clear, simple, and sincere. When the host asked her, "What does your father think about all this attention?" she smiled and replied, "He's proud, but he reminds me every day that the real strength is inside me, not in his name." After the show aired, things changed even more. She got a message from an organization that worked with bullied kids. They wanted her to be their youth ambassador. Leah felt overwhelmed. She was just a schoolgirl. But when she talked to her dad about it, he said something that stayed with her. "Leah, you don't have to be ready to make a difference. You just have to be willing." She agreed. Now, every month, Leah visited different schools. She shared her story, but more importantly, she listened to others. She created a small group in her own school called Voice Circle, where kids could share their feelings, fears, and hopes without judgment. Slowly, the school changed. Bullying didn't disappear, but it was no longer ignored. Teachers became more aware. Students started supporting each other. Even the school principal noticed the difference. At the end of the year, during the school awards ceremony, Leah was asked to come on stage. She didn't expect anything big, but the principal cleared his throat and said, "This year, we're creating a new award, the Heart of Courage Award, and its first winner is Leah Carter." The entire hall stood up to clap. Leah walked to the stage, her eyes wet with tears. She didn't write a speech, she just spoke from the heart. I was once the girl no one saw. I was the one who sat alone. I was bullied, called names, and made to feel like I didn't belong. But I didn't break. I bent, I cried, I fell, but I got back up. Not because I had a famous father, but because I decided that my pain would not define me. If I can do it, so can anyone here. We are all stronger than we think. The applause that followed was louder than anything she had ever heard. After graduation, Leah got offers to join big universities, but she decided to take a gap year, not to travel the world or to chase fame, but to build something real. She started a small foundation with her dad's help, aimed at helping kids facing bullying and racism. They called it Quiet Power, because Leah believed that sometimes the loudest strength comes from silence, patience, and grace. The first year of the foundation was hard. There were meetings, fundraising events, and long nights writing emails and making phone calls. But every time Leah felt tired, she remembered the face of that little girl with the lion drawing. And she kept going. One day, she got a message from a boy in another country. He said, "I was going to give up on life. Then I found your story. Now I want to live." Leah cried for a long time after reading it. That message reminded her why she started this journey. Years passed. Leah went to university, studied psychology, and continued to lead her foundation. She never forgot where she came from. And no matter how big her name became, she always said, "I'm Leah, just Leah, the girl who once sat under a tree, reading books and hoping no one would notice her." But now the world noticed, and they listened, because her story wasn't just about pain. It was about strength, change, and hope. And Leah? She was no longer afraid to be seen. She had become what she was always meant to be, not a shadow behind. A famous name, but a light for others trying to find their way.